And we read this first day of Rosh Hashana. We read about Hashem Pag Hadasara, about the birth of Yitzchak, how HaKadosh Baruch Hu kept his commitment to Abraham and Sarah, and in a sense that laid the foundation for the future of Klal Yisrael, for the future of the Jewish people. And the Haftarah of the first day is the Haftarah of Hannah. Hannah was felt in a sense of desperation. She wanted to have a son, and how eventually she had Shmuel as a son, and then even the Haftarah of the second day. So it includes Rachel, Mavakal, Baneha, Belkim, Meshiva. When the Jewish people, the way Chazal explain it, go into Golus, go into exile, and they'll be on the road in journeying into exile, whether it's Babylonian exile or it's Roman exile. The Jewish people know what it means to be on the road. And they'll pass by in Beis Lechem, they'll pass by the grave of Rachel, and they'll be mispalel there. The Rachel Mavaka Baneha, Rachel cries, and she doesn't stop crying. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells her that don't worry, eventually your children will return l'gvulam, to their place. My father would say that's based on the Kriyas. I don't remember whether he applied it to the Haftarah of the second day of Rosh Hashanah also. I would assume that he did. That to a certain degree, Rosh Hashanah is dedicated to the Yemos, to the matriarchs of the Jewish people. And clearly, if we take focus of the Haftarah of the first day, this is not limited to the Yemos of Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, although they are the examples. But it's the Yemos, the Jewish Yemos of the generations. But we have to understand what's the connection between Rosh Hashanah and the Yemos. It's true, the Kriyos, the reading deal with the Yemos, at least many of them, and it's certainly the final Kriya, the second day of Rosh Hashanah, does not deal with the Yemos. So we have to understand the connection to the Yemos, because there clearly is a certain emphasis on the Yemos, but we have to know what that connection between the Yemos and Rosh Hashanah is. And we have to understand the significance of the Kriya, of the Akedah of the second day. Now, the Gemara in Megillah discusses what should be the Kriya. What is the Torah portion that is read? What is the Torah portion that is read on Rosh Hashanah? And two opinions are mentioned. One opinion is that we read Chodesh Hashvi, way Rashi explains it, that has reference to Parshas Emor, the Parshas Hamawadim in Sefer Vayikra. There's some that say that the Kriya should have started according to that opinion with Chodesh Hashvi. Some say it starts at the beginning of the Parsha. Whatever the case. And some, it's a little strange, but say that it has reference to the Parsha in Parshas Pinchas, about Chodesh Hashvi, which we say actually as part of the Maftir. But whatever the case, and then the other opinion is we read Vashem Pakad Sarah. God remembered Sarah, and Sarah conceived, and she became pregnant, and ultimately she had a son Yitzchak, and that was the foundation of the future generations of the Jewish people. And then the Gemara says, Vahidna, but now that we have 2 days Rosh Hashanah, so we need 2 kriyas. So it says the first day we read Vashem Pakad Sarah, and on the second day we read the kriya, we read the portion of the Akedah. That God tested Abraham, and he gave a command to Abraham that Abraham should take his son, his only son, his beloved son, and put him on the altar. And ultimately, how the Malach appeared to Abraham and said, Al tishlach yotcha lanar, don't touch him, don't do anything to him. At yadati, now I know that you fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now it's very strange. First, there are 2 opinions. Which is the proper kriya when there was only 1 day of Rosh Hashanah? So you would have expected that when we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, that one kriya would be on 1 day of Rosh Hashanah, and the other kriya, the other opinion, would have been in the 2nd day of Rosh Hashanah. And we see that in a number of situations where there is a disagreement as to what is the proper kriya for Yontif, but when there are 2 days of Yontif, so we use the 2 days to accommodate both opinions. And here, because there were 2 days, they ignore the opinion, which actually talks about Rosh Hashanah explicitly. And they suggest another kriya, another reading about the Akedah that doesn't mention Rosh Hashanah explicitly. Now, why do we read about the Akedah and Rosh Hashanah? Why do we read Vashem Pakad Sarah and Rosh Hashanah? So it's brought down because the Akedah, the placing of Yitzchak on the altar, that was on Rosh Hashanah. Vashem Pakad Sarah, God remembered Sarah. Sarah conceived. She became pregnant with Yitzchak. That also happened on Rosh Hashanah. Okay, but somehow it would seem that doesn't deal with the essence of Rosh Hashanah. These are very important events, historical events. And certainly, since we needed an extra kriya, logic would have dictated that perhaps we should have taken on the extra day, the opinion that said that we read the parsha in Emor that talks explicitly about Rosh Hashanah, about the karbanos that are given on Rosh Hashanah. So why is it that the Torah that the Chachamim, when there was 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, they added when there's 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, they added they added the parsha of the Akedah. Now, I want to suggest that they added the parsha of the Akedah and not the parsha of Rosh Hashanah that talks about shofar. I meant shofar. So about shofar, Zichron Trua, that talks explicitly. Now, I want to suggest something I haven't seen anybody to suggest it. But I want to suggest that originally, when there was only 1 day of Rosh Hashanah, the Kriya, the reading of the Kriyas HaTorah of Rosh Hashanah, that started Vashem Pakad Asara, was a longer Kriya. In other words, the Akedah was included in that Kriya of 1 day. Because we know immediately after the Kriya, after the reading of Hashem Pakad Asara, which concludes with Avimelech making the bris with Avram Avinu. So immediately afterwards is the parsha parsha of the Akedah. So I think when there was only 1 day of Rosh Hashanah, the parsha of Hashem Pakad Asara and the reading about the Akedah was all part and parcel of the same Kriya. But then when there were 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, instead of taking another Kriya, they divided the original Kriya, the original reading, into 2 parts. And the question is, why did they divide the Kriya into 2 parts instead of taking another Kriya? But Rosh Hashanah is unique, that when it has 2 days, and it manifests itself in many halachas, in many areas, it's considered like 1 day. The 2 days are considered a Yoma Arichta. It's not just 2 days, 1 day coming after the other. But in regard to many halachas, the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are considered like 1 day. It's not just 1 day after the other, but it's 2 days that are connected to each other, that become 1 day. And to emphasize that point, they took the extended Kriya of Rosh Hashanah and they divided it into 2 to emphasize that the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are considered like 1 day. Now, and it's very interesting. With this, we could answer a question that some ask. Because The question is, why do we read the part about Abimelech and Rosh Hashanah? We understand by Hashem Pakad Sarah, God remembered Sarah. We understand that. It was because that was on Rosh Hashanah. We understand the Akedah, the significance of the Akedah Rosh Hashanah, because that was also on Rosh Hashanah. There's no medrash that says that I'm aware of that the bris, the covenant that Avraham made with Avimelech, allowing Avimelech to have a few generations control over his land, and that the Jewish people, his descendants, would not interfere with Avimelech's control of the land. But that has nothing to do with Rosh Hashanah. So why do we read about Avimelech on Rosh Hashanah? And I think that perhaps we could say it because originally the Kriya was one Kriya. And that Kriya was read not for one reason, but for two reasons. But in truth, the two reasons are one reason. The Kriya was read because Hashem Pakad Sarah, because it spoke about Sarah becoming the mother of Klal Yisrael, becoming having Yitzhak as a son, which happened on Rosh Hashanah, being remembered at Rosh Hashanah, and also it speaks about the Akedah, which also happened in Rosh Hashanah. And the events of Abimelech in the middle happened to be in the middle between the two of them. So if it's one Kriya, and even when we divide it in half, we want the two to be connected, to emphasize that it's a Yom HaRichta, that the 2 days are not just 2 days, one after the other, but from a certain halachic perspective, it's considered as one day. So because of that, the Parsha of Abimelech, before it was 2 days, it needed to be mentioned because the Kriya included both. Hashem Pakad Sarah, God remembering Sarah, and the Akedah, both of which happened on Rosh Hashanah. And afterwards, because we want to link the two parshas together to emphasize that it's a Yom HaRichta, it's one day. There are other possible answers that could be given to that, but I want to understand the significance. I think it's not, I think besides the fact that the two parshas, the one parsha being divided into two, to emphasize the Yom HaRichta, has another idea contained in it, why it's significant that the two parshas be together. Now, I want to suggest that I want to go a little further than my father. My father said that Rosh Hashanah was a day dedicated to the Amos and to the mothers. I think I would say a little different, that it's a day dedicated to parenthood, both to the mothers and the fathers. And if you want to know why that's significant in Rosh Hashanah, because Rosh Hashanah, we identify with Brias Olam, but the truth is Rosh Hashanah is not the day that the world was first created. Rosh Hashanah commemorates the creation of man. And Asher bara Elokim lasos, the Torah tells us that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, created the world lasos. What does it mean, lasos? But in a sense, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted man to become his partner in the creation of the world. And in a sense, having children, in a sense, makes us the partner of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the creation of man. Chazal tell us that God is a partner with husband and wife in creating every human being. And Rosh Hashanah represents the day that God created man. So Rosh Hashanah is dedicated to parenthood, because a person is not just created through conception and through birth, but in the bringing up of the child and bringing him into adulthood. And in regard to the Jewish people, it's not just bringing them into the world, but it's linking them with the past and linking them with the future. There being our link to the future. That is all part of having children. And that is why it's identified in Rosh Hashanah. Now, it's very interesting. I want to suggest that when you take a look at the Sedra of the Akedah, the Parsha of the Akedah, so when the Torah employs the Lashon, Vayelchu Yachdav twice, they went together. In going to the Akedah, Vayelchu Yachdav is only mentioned when Abraham is there together with Yitzchak. After Abraham told the two servants that accompanied him on the journey from his home to Har Moriah, Shvulachem Poem Chamor, you stay here. It talks of a private relationship between parent and child. The Vayelchu Shnehem Yachdav there is indicative of the fact that there are areas in the Masorah that is only given over from one generation to the other generation. It represents the privacy of the Jewish people. There are areas of the Masorah. Our religion is a private religion. And it's reserved for us and our future generations. We link the past with our future generations. So I think that the two Sedras, the two Parshas, I should say, Hashem Pakad Asara and the Parsha of the Akedah, focuses on parenthood. Hashem Pakad Asara for the main part, even though Avram is mentioned there also, it focuses on motherhood. But the Akedah focuses on fatherhood. Vayelchu Shnehem Yachdav, the linkage of the generations. Now, it's very interesting. The Chazal tell us that the Chazal tell us that now there's the Rashbam. There's a Rashbam. The Rashbam says that there's a question really everybody asks. The Medrash asks, the Rishonim. It's interesting that the Rishonim give other tarutzim besides what the Medrash says. The Akedah starts off by Yi Achar Hadvarim Eila, was after these things. What things? The Rashbam says that Avram made a mistake in making a bris, a covenant with Avimelech. And because of this, the Jewish people had trouble later on. In other words, he had no business allowing Avimelech, in letting Avimelech see the fact that for 3-4 generations, the Jewish people will have no claim on that part of Eretz Yisrael. And because of this, the Rashbam says he was given the Nishayim. And it's interesting, the Ramban says that Nishayim wasn't just a test, but in a sense it was to raise a certain concern, to cause Avram to have a certain concern about the losing of his children. Apparently, Avram, by making this agreement with Avimelech, in a sense, was causing harm to future generations in getting the land of Eretz Yisrael. Now it's true. Why did Avram do it? Why did Avram do it? Avram knew of all the commitments and all the promises. And it's interesting, after the Akedah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's one of the brachas by the Akedah, but it was given to him long before that he's going to inherit the land. But apparently, by making this bris, this covenant with Avimelech, he acted improperly vis-a-vis the commitment that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave him to get to inherit the land of Eretz Yisrael. Now, why did Avram do it? I think the reason Avram did it, and I saw that Avram did it because Avram was told, Dor Revi Yeshuva Heina. Originally, you're going to go down. Your descendants are going to go down to Egypt, and they're going to be slaves, or in another land, Beretz Lolohem Ba'avodim V'Nuro Samar B'Beyoshana. But only later on, a generation later on, will be able to take possession of the land. And the bris that Avram made with Avimelech, which his descendants violated many times, should be added, reminiscent of some of the so-called peace treaties that have been made between Israel and its neighbors, that Israel is always held to account for, and the neighbors never once held to account for. When the original peace treaty was made, that Arafat Yamach Shemo was a partner of, the agreement was that if someone does terrorism, he will be handed over to the Jewish people. He will be handed over to Israel. Did that ever happen? Did the United States, who brokered the deal, stand up for Israel, for the commitment that it arranged? Not once. We have to know who we can trust and who we can't trust. And the truth is, the only one we can trust is HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Avram felt, in view of the fact that there will be many generations before the Jewish people return to Eretz Yisrael. So if his grandchildren have control over the land, they will not interfere with the Jewish people taking possession of the land. Okay, things didn't exactly turn out that way. We find that even for future generations, there were problems. But let's understand what was the mistake that Avram made. And when we say that Avram made a mistake, it's not so much that he made a mistake as a lesson for future generations. I already mentioned one, These people don't keep their commitments. But there's a personal lesson that doesn't have so much to do with Avimelech, but has to do with that personal relationship, that linkage of the generations between Avram and Yitzchak and future generations as well. Now, when we take a look at the Akedah, so at the Akedah, when we take a look at the Akedah, so it's Avram goes with Yishmael, with his Shnei Na'arav, his two servants, and the Medrash asks, who were the two servants that Avram went with? And the Medrash says that Daskeni Balatosis mentions this Medrash. The Shnei Na'arav was Yishmael, the son of Hagar, a maid servant, and Eliezer, great man, was in charge of Avram's whole household. But after all said and done, he was an Eved Avram. And they came to the Vayhi Bayom Shlishi. They came to the third day that they were on the road. And Vayaras Hamakom Eirachol, they saw the place from afar. And when they saw the place from afar, so what did they see? The Medrash says. What did Avram see? So the Medrash says, Har Noah, he saw a beautiful mountain. But Anan Kosher Alaha, and there was a heavenly cloud attached to it. Very strange. Then he turned to Yitzchak, and he said to Yitzchak, what do you see? And Yitzchak said, I see a beautiful mountain, Har Noah. But Anan Kosher Alaha, a heavenly mountain, a heavenly cloud was attached to it. He turned to Shnei Na'arav, to Yishmael. And Yishmael at that time was already a Baal Tshuva. And he turned also to Eliezer, who was as special could be. And he said, what do you see? And they said, we don't see anything. What do you mean you didn't see anything? What they meant to say, they didn't see anything different. The Yerushalayim, Harim, Savivla. In the Yerushalayim area, there are lots of mountains. Har Moriah is Yerushalayim. There are a lot of mountains. No one mountain stood out. So he said, Shvulachem poem achamor. You stay here with the donkey. Vanivanar nelchat kol. And we will serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we will return to you. And the Medrash says, because he said, you don't see anything. The Chamor doesn't see anything. The donkey doesn't see anything. You sit here. This is not an area. Yes, there are times when I can go with you, when I can have a very important relationship with you. You are people of stature, even spiritual stature. Yishmael was already about Shuvah. Eliezer, we know for sure. Yofa Sichasan Shalab de Yavos, Yosami Tarasan Shalbanim. But nevertheless, you are like the Chamor. Stay here with the Chamor. And the Medrash goes on to say that halachically, when it comes to pedigree, servitude is not identified with pedigree. The children of a servant, the children of a slave, this was the Das Kenan Baal Tosfos adds to the Medrash, are not considered his servant, his children. They don't have his pedigree in regard to many things. But because of this, Shvulachem Poem Achamor, because they didn't see. Question: what does all of this have to do with the idea of pedigree? Okay, vayelchu shneim yachdav, when it comes, there's a distinction. Relationship of Masorah is one thing, friendship is another thing. But what does it have to do with pedigree and all of that? Now, it's interesting. Chazal tell us next week in the Chayesara, I shouldn't say next week, Cedra. In the Chayesara, Chazal, our sages tell us that Avram sent Eliezer to find a wife for Yitzchak. And the Chazal tell us, Ulay lo yobo ha'ishal aleches, that Eliezer was hoping that Yitzchak should marry his daughter. But Avram said no. According to Medrash, you're Oror, you're cursed. Who Baruch, and he is blessed. You are an Eved, and he is not an Eved. What is the idea that is suggested? But I think the idea is that the mentality of Avodim, besides the halach of Avodim being different, and the halach of Avodim being different is reflective of the psychology of Avodim, of the psychology of slaves. A matter of fact, Reb Chaim used to say that the psychology that is associated with mitzvah the Torah became a part of the natural world because it was supposed to be a mitzvah Torah, whatever it is. But the psychology of Avodim, the halachas of Avodim, that they don't have pedigree and all that, is reflective of the metzius, of the facts of the world when there were slaves. A slave, if he had children, the children belonged to the master. The master could sell him, he could sell the children, he could sell the wife. There couldn't be a real family relationship. And because they didn't have that real family relationship, there was a weakening in the linkage of the generations. And the halacha of yichus, of pedigree, is reflective of the strength of the linkage of the generations. Even by non-Jews, there is halacha pedigree. But by Jews, it's much stronger because of the concept of Masorah. And that's what I think. And because of that, a slave only has the fleeting moment of the present. Where is he going to get his next meal? But he has no linkage to the past generations, and to a certain degree, the linkage to the future generations is weakened also. And to be a parent of Klal Yisrael, you have to have a focus, not just on the present, but on the future also. A true parent, his concern or her concern is not how many prizes their child will get at graduation. There's nothing wrong with it. But that's not the primary purpose of parenthood. That's not the primary nachas of parenthood. That unfortunately is a mistake that we make. True parenthood manifests itself in a concern for the future. In a future that they themselves might not see. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, "Hamachasani me Abraham." Do I hide from Avram that I'm going to destroy stone? Va'Avram haya yiyeh l'goy gadol. Ki yidatev l'man ashir tzaveh es bonav es beiso achrav. Because he commands his children and his family after him. And my father explained, Achrav means, well, the simple shot is Achrav means after he's dead, after he's no longer there, he commands them not just how to act when he's there, but how to act afterwards. But my father suggested Achrav, and the two explanations go together. Achrav by example. Avram commanded by example. Future generations, if you want it to last, the impact, the impression, it has to be teaching by example. When Avram made that deal with Abimelech, so he had a very good rationale. They're not going to be coming into Eretz Yisrael anyway. What do I care? And we take a look at the story of the Meraglim. By the Meraglim, they weren't so concerned about Eretz Yisrael. They saw themselves as coming to take the land of the Canaanim. So they saw themselves as not only not having a military advantage, but they didn't have they had a psychological disadvantage, because the Eretz Yisrael in their mind belonged to the Canaanim, to the Canaanites. And they were coming to take it away from the Canaanites. So they had a psychological disadvantage. The Rosh says, in regard to the case of Hu Arba, that a person is more determined to keep what's his than to take what belongs to somebody else. And it's that attitude that led the Meraglim to sin. To say there's no way we're going to capture the land. Yoshua said, we can capture it, but the word Yerashnu is also inherited. It's ours. We can do it. Because maybe we don't have the military advantage, but we have the psychological advantage. Because the knowledge that it was given to us, that we're getting it from Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, who got it from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That gives us the advantage of the psychological advantage that sometimes can overcome the military advantage. Later on, when they saw that the Jewish people did not have that feeling, they said, we can get it derech nes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu could give it to us. Eretz asher hizavas chol v'dvash. But at first, Yoshua wanted to say, we can get it. We have the advantage of knowing it's ours, more so than the Canaan. Why is it that the Jewish people, the Meraglim, thought that they're coming to take a land that belongs to somebody else? I think because they mistakenly understood Avram's bris with Avimelech. In their minds, Avimelech's bris, the bris with Avimelech meant that until the Jewish people come, that land is not theirs. So they are coming to get the land that belonged to the Canaanim. And that was a mistake that Avram made. Avram didn't mean to say that it doesn't belong to us. He was giving them a license to dwell there. But that's why you have to be concerned. But it wasn't an issue at that point. Avram didn't realize. But parenthood manifests itself in concern for the future. What was it about Avram? Avram saw Hashana. He saw a beautiful mountain. And he saw a heavenly cloud on it. Where was that heavenly cloud? Why didn't Eliezer Eliezer was a great person. Why didn't he see it? Eliezer was a great person there in the present. But Eliezer didn't have a sense for the future, at least for his own future, because after all said and done, he had a serval perspective. And because he had to see the Shekhinah from afar, Eliezer was able to the Shekhinah when it was close up. Rasa Shivka Layam, the maidservant in the sea, Mashallah Ra Yecheskel ben Buzi. But the Shivcha, and that might have been the Jews, but at that time they also had, to a certain degree, a serval perspective, having been slaves in Egypt. It was Alayam. They were able to see the Shekhinah. But when they get tomorrow, it's an altogether different story. They have momentary recognition of revelation, but they weren't able to keep. They weren't able to keep that perspective because they didn't at that point yet have a sense for the future. Parenthood manifests itself in the future. Chazal tell us it's very interesting in the Tochacha in Chumash Vayikra, the Chukosai. Torah says the Zacharti is Brisi Yaakov, Vafes Brisi Avram. Vafes Brisi Yitzchak, Vafes Brisi Avram Eskor. I will remember my covenant with Yaakov. I will remember my covenant with Isaac, and my covenant with Abraham. I will remember. But Eskor, Rashi points out, is not mentioned by Yitzchak's name. Eskor is not mentioned by Yitzchak's name. Why isn't remembrance mentioned by Yitzchak? So the Medrash says, Ofrol shel Yitzchak nira lefanai, the ashes of Yitzchak appear before me. Sover umunach al hamizbeach, piled and lying on the Mizbeach. Where are the ashes of Yitzchak? Except for one strange medrash. Yitzchak was never burned. Where are the ashes of Yitzchak? But the answer is the ashes of Yitzchak. Those are the ashes of the generations of the Jewish people that were killed on Kiddush Hashem, including the ashes of the Jewish children in Gaza that were put in the ovens. It goes without saying, the ashes of the Jewish people in the Holocaust, one generation after the other. Those are the ashes of Yitzchak. Because the trait of Yitzchak is something that was successfully and necessarily transmitted throughout the generations. The traits of Yitzchak doesn't have to be remembered, it's seen. It's nira lefanai. The traits of Avraham and Yaakov, they were great. No one is talking who's greater, who's not greater, but it has to be remembered. But take a look. When the war first broke out, they had pictures on TV and the iPad and the internet of the soldiers being Makabel Shabbos. You saw soldiers without yarmulkes, chilonim, dancing for the coming of Shabbos. Bowie Kala, Bowie Shabbos Propulsa. That's the Shekhinah of Shabbos coming. These were the ones that were Moser Nefesh. Why? Where did they get that ability? They were chilonim, so-called chilonim. Where did they get it? They got it from Yitzchak. then those that were killed, that's the Yafro Shel Yitzchak. In other words, the important thing to be a true parent, you have to be concerned about the future. And a future manifests itself in the future manifests itself. How does it given over? It's given over by example. So Dativ, yes, Avram's traits were not so successfully transmitted, but it was transmitted to a certain degree. And it's transmitted because we remember Avram, as HaKadosh Baruch Hu remembers Avram. Dativ, it's by example. The parenthood manifests itself in concern for the future and by example. And this was the idea of the Akedah. The Akedah was the transmission of the personality traits of the Yavos to future generations. That is what the Akedah is all about. And Rosh Hashana, that is dedicated to creation of man, and thereby to man, HaKadosh Baruch, that Klal Yisrael, being a part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in producing future generations. And producing future generations doesn't just manifest itself in birth and conception, but it manifests itself in bringing up and serving as an example for future generations. There's a thought that is always said over in the name of Moshe Feinstein Zatzal. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael es Shabbos la'asos es Shabbos l'dorosam. The way we observe Shabbos is the impact it has on future generations. You can observe Shabbos, but if you're looking at your watch, when is Shabbos going to be over? Then the future generations have a bad attitude towards the observance of Shabbos. But if Shabbos represents something that you're looking forward to, then V'shamru b'nei Yisrael lasos as a Shabbos l'dorosam, it's concerned about the future. I think the two parshas coming together, the basis of the Yom HaRichta doesn't just emphasize the Yom HaRichta, but it connects the parenthood, the motherhood, and fatherhood that is part of the parenthood of the Jewish people. You have to have parenthood has to manifest itself, ideally, in joint parenthood. By Ben Sora Mora, Torah says, "Eino shomea b'kol aviv v'kol imo." But when the mother and father come, they say, "Enenu shomea b'koleinu." The problem is that the kol of the father and mother is two separate kolos, two separate voices. When parents speak in two separate voices, there is a mixed message. And the mixed message, at best, there's no message at all. And sometimes it's a lot worse than that. The two parshas coming together is that we're concerned for the future. And that was the lesson to Avram. Avram, you certainly were a person concerned for the future. But when you teach for the future, yes, perhaps the way you were thinking, not realizing how history will play out, it wouldn't affect the future. But it will affect the future of the attitude of your children. They'll see Eretz Yisrael, they'll have an excuse to see Eretz Yisrael as real estate, as something that doesn't belong to them now, only as something that they have an option to take it in the future. And that will lessen the closeness that they have to the land of Eretz Yisrael. And that was the idea of the Akedah. The idea of the Akedah was to stress the importance of parenthood about the future. You see, and even by Yishmael, Sarah recognized, he said, Yishmael can't inherit together with Yitzhak, because Yishmael's inheritance together with Yitzhak will have a negative effect on the Masorah that Yitzhak receives from Abraham. We have to bear that in mind. There are times when Vayelchu Shnehem Yachdav, and there are times Vayelchu Yachdav. And we have to know that when it comes, this is the problem. And Israel, in submitting to the United States throughout the years, only looked at the present. This is the idea of peace treaties. Peace treaties is only about the present. There were treaties, look, all over the world. Ukraine and Russia. How long did that last? Longer than the peace treaties that we have, that we, the Jewish people, have with our neighbors. But didn't last long either. I remember I mention all the time, my grandfather would say, Bake Shalom B'Revfehu, search out the peace first, then go after it. What does it mean, search it out? I think what it means, search it out, doesn't mean just look at the peace treaty the way it is today. But how do you know that what role will this peace treaty play in the future? The Jewish people constantly gave everything. But the only thing they got was today. They didn't get tomorrow. This is the significance of the war as being fought now. I think there's a certain sense that we're not fighting about today. We're fighting about tomorrow also. And the truth of the matter is, in many of the peace treaties that Israel signed, they didn't even get today. And this is the lesson of Rosh Hashana. You know, there are those that say Rosh Hashana is the head. It's not the beginning of the year, it's the head of the year. I don't know that that's the Pashut shot, but the idea is certainly true. The head gives signals to the rest of the body, initiates how the rest of the body has to react. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippurim, you see in the Gemara Nedarim, is also called Rosh Hashanah, perhaps for that reason. It's these 10 days, Rosh Hashanah through the Aseres Yemei Tshuva, through Yom Kippurim, that give signals to the rest of the year, and from the rest of the year to the future years as well. Rosh Hashanah is dedicated to the future. It sends out signals for the future. And we have to look forward, that when we look at Rosh Hashanah, we have to be motivated by concern for the future. We are the parents of future generations. And we have to take the lesson of Rosh Hashanah and not just focus about today and on tomorrow, but to focus on the future generations and even a future that we might not be there to see.
So if we're talking about the peace treaty, so it's important that everyone, questions could be put in the chat right now. So reading about Avimelech and Ficha coming,
yeah,
make a bris is an important part of the Kriya. It's not just there as
that's right, exactly.
What should we strive?
But that's according. I didn't say that because that's only according to the Rashbam's shot. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
What should we strive to have as kavanah when we hear the Kriya and Rosh Hashanah? Parentheses, for those of us who are parents and for those of us who are not yet parents.
First of all, concern about the future. That's the first thing. The second thing that we have to focus on, I think, is we have to recognize the soldiers, something that unfortunately many in our community do not recognize the contribution of the soldiers and how they are fighting for us, that they are the ones that have the Mesiras Nefesh of Yitzchak. I understand that there is a demonstration today in the United States about the attempts to which I'm not necessarily in favor of, to draft the yeshiva boys. This is not the time. Just like it was wrong for the Supreme Court to bring up this topic now, it's a wrong now during the war to bring it up. But my question is, okay, you're making a demonstration about that. But when it came to demonstrate on behalf of Israel for the war, you weren't there. You weren't there. You had all kinds of excuses. Sharei terutzim lo ninalu. They weren't there. The same ones that are demonstrating today in the United States about the law of drafting yeshiva boys were not there when it came to demonstrate about the Jewish children that were put in the ovens in Gaza. We have to understand, and they don't give credit. They don't recognize that those soldiers dying on the battlefield are dying for them. Many people say that if you go into the Haredi community, besides the recitation of a Perek Tehillim at the end of the davening, I'm not saying this, but I'm just telling you what people in Eretz Yisrael whose children are fighting in the army, observant people whose children actually learn also, but decided that they're going to join the army. They say, you will hardly know that there's a war outside. Except for the fact that sometimes it interferes. This was not the time for all of this. And it raises questions. Why didn't you come to the demonstration? If you're ready to demonstrate for this, what did you do for those who are fighting to save your lives? That's what I think we should learn by the Akedah. But we have to focus on future generations, and they focus in their own way on future generations. But they have to understand the boys learning in Hebron Yeshiva in 1929, and it was no fault of theirs, who got killed, who were learning Torah, unfortunately, were not put in a position to transmit that Torah to their future generations. And unless we recognize the efforts of those who are fighting for the existence of future generations, you have to wonder sometimes what assurance we'll have that we'll be able to continue the Masorah, that everybody will be able to continue this Masorah for future generations as well.
There are not any other questions. Everyone have a ksiva tova, a good bench your, and next week on the Tinus, do you think there's going to be share?
We'll let you know. We'll have to see what the story is. Yeah, I'll let you know. We'll let people know. Okay.